Well, Curt is also our speaker today. He's an experienced entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur now with multiple ventures. Spun technology out of dog hoarding. He's a world-class scientist, world-renowned researcher, and he's going to talk to us about surviving the growth rate. Growth curve, rather.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And this is a fun topic. Some of you may have heard me talk to the MMIC group in the past. 2-3 years ago I taught, and I really kind of focused on a little bit of the entrepreneur needing to really understand themselves in the mix. And I did the ego-id, Maslow triangle, self-analysis kind of thinking, because I found that as I went through the corporate life and then coming out into the real world and facing things, I didn't really totally face myself. My wife and I agreed on certain things, certain risks that we would take with the family, fortune, if you will, or which wasn't a fortune, and with 2 kids in college and all of the other risks you take when you start things. And so I thought it was a thing to reflect on, how kind of the trials and travails of that. But this I found is even a more interesting topic in a different way. And it was to try to look at a model thing that we use in business, and we learn in, whether it's a corporate training session or a formal business school, that there is this thing called the S-curve. And when you stop back and reflect on it, it's real. It really happens. And so the idea that how do you get through these early years, the startup years in a sense, of the S-curve was kind of an intriguing thing to try to put together. And so just because I get philosophical about things, I kind of blew that out, and I said that the S-curve really predicts a change. And that if you look at change in a big macro scale, we've gone through all kinds of ages and various university people that look at these patterns, these things of change, would say we're in the creativity age today. And that's what we're all part of. Now, what does that mean? In the reflection on all of this is, up goes the old and in comes the new. How do you predict it? How do you get on that part of the S-curve and stuff? Because what we're trying to do, what you're trying to do with new businesses is take advantage of the opportunities that get set down. So we take this macro historical kind of scale, and we set down in it with our great ideas and our great enthusiasm, and we're going to win. Because when you become an entrepreneur, that option of failing gets very, very painful. And so how do you avoid the pitfalls that lead you to be one of the 90% of new startups that fail? How do you try to minimize that? And being philosophical, I thought maybe we're in the age of Aquarius a little bit, and we're leading ourselves because we as entrepreneurs, of course, we're winners. We've got the best idea in the world, and we're going to win. And so, golden living and dreams and visions go right along with the whole beat of the age of Aquarius. But let's get serious. If we don't sit down and anticipate and plan and be flexible and have some form of exit strategy, we have not served ourselves or the investment that we're making personally and with other people very well. Take the time to anticipate, plan, be flexible, and look at your exit strategies. This is your life, and it's probably your fortune. And enter the realities of the growth curve. And it is inevitable. This is very, very real. Products go companies go in these cycles. And we're going to investigate a little bit. Now, this is a percent adoption of your product, company, service that you're taking to the marketplace. And there's this innovation stage and this growth stage. And we're going to stop here. We'll talk a little bit about what happens at these mature stages because that, too, is important. And I want to lay some foundations because if we don't look at the simple truths that get reflected on this slide, and we're not analyzing how things look in these early years and projecting to the beyond, all the way, as I implied earlier, to the exit strategy thinking. Add value to everyone in the chain. Add value to everyone in your company. Add value to everyone that you use as a supplier. You have to be observant, listen, read, and combine. Having forums like this available, having the MMIC as an intellectual resource, a psychological resource, have these sounding boards is so critical. And it's not like when you were in high school and you weren't going to raise your hand because you knew your question was too stupid. You got to ask the stupid questions. You've got to seek out counsel from people that have been along this trail so you can minimize the pitfalls that you're going to inevitably come into. You need to care immensely about what you do, how you do it, and who you do it with. All of that's important. It's not just the passion, and it's not about you. It's got to be how you interconnect with the people that are really going to make you successful, with the things that are going to make you successful. So, and I really believe that if you're really trying to create a company, and you're really trying to create a service to your customer, it's not just defining the customer, but get bigger than that. Connect to a purpose. There isn't anything bad about having an idealistic view of what you do. That's not la-la land. It's something that you can pin real productivity to. You can pin real connections to your customers, to your vendors, and everything that's in your macro world that you live in. And because life and business are set in a web, and the feel-goods and the productivity and the real feel-good that comes from that, from what you're building, from what you're doing now, should be there. It should be part of the heartbeat of what you do. And again, I'm trying to share experiences that when I started, Scotty Locker and I started an antimicrobial company. Cal, you know these kinds of feelings. You were saving lives. You were doing something that was constructive with the products, the poisons that we used. And if you use them right, what you can make such a positive impact with. That's a feel-good. But, you step back from those realities that I say exist. There are three simple questions that I ask everybody that asks me for some counsel. Who are you? Where are you going? And how are you going to get there? And if they can't verbalize this, if you can't verbalize it about what you're doing, step back and think about it a little bit and start putting some meat to that. We're going to use this as part of our topic forum because in the early stages of the S curve, of the growth curve, you need to be examining these things on both a company and a personal level. So it's the same for you and for the company. So I pose these kinds of questions, and this may seem too basic in a way, but it's not, because you really need to say, who are you? And do you want to function in a not-for-profit company or a for-profit company? Do you want to be an owner? Do you want to be a worker? Do you want to work with people, or do you want to be a loner? These, for entrepreneurs, this is critical kind of thinking. Because if you start saying, no, I'm going to be this, but I can't build a business if I'm off, being just a singular consultant. I still have to deal with customers, real people that you have to resolve conflict with and do all of those other things. And so an entrepreneur has to understand these things. But it builds on a bigger scale of where do you want your company to go? Am I just out there to feed my family? Well, maybe I can be alone. and if it's a hobby business, maybe I can be alone. But if I'm building something to operate a business, or if I'm building it to sell a business, which could be merging or however, or if I'm doing something as a stock play, I'm trying to build a company so that I can go public and leave. The way you structure your activity, the way you keep your balance sheets, the way you do everything in your business, depending on what your goal is, changes. How you operate and how you record how you operate. And one question I really challenge people is, how big do you want to be? I came out of working in Dow and Dow Corning, and when at Dow Chemical, I had at one time 9 people that reported to me, and another 48 people underneath that. And 9 people reporting to you? Do you want to be that big? That was an insane part of my life. And so defining that limit of employees, and think of these questions. Where do you become responsible for all kinds of different employee reporting, tax reporting, investment reporting, because of the number of employees you have? The geography, how big do you want to be? Local, state, national, global? How do you tie this to your personal and your business goals of you and your partners? Then these questions, and this is all those early years, you better do it. How are you going to finance it? So you're going to do it with some stock, and how much stock? Because it triggers into this thing again. Where do you get into tax reporting things? Where do you get into burdensome kinds of documentation that you have to report to the stockholders? And that number seems to float around, but when you get above 30 investors, I don't know, Ted, you might know those numbers, but there's certain numbers where the reporting becomes burdensome. And so, do you want to work with investors? Do you want to do things with your employees in terms of the financing? Do you want to do this with your operating partners? Answering these questions in those early years are very, very important. So, who are you? The investor-partner relationship. This is so important. My partner that I went off when we formed Aegis Environmental Management, we're like total different people. I'm the scientist, geek, crazy risk taker guy. He was a lawyer, calm, collected, steady on the beam. We made an incredible partnership as people, and melded together in a way that I'm just so thankful for, because he saved us, and I saved us. He saved us, and I saved us, and it took that ability to have open communication with each other. But the company you keep is the company you build or destroy with. And it's like way better, way more important than picking a spouse or anything. Because everybody's got to be flexible. They've got to get buy-in from the family and the partners. When I had the opportunity to buy the technology from Dow Corning, the person that opened that door for me luckily knew my wife and said, "You go home and talk to Pat about this." you know, and I thought that was pretty good advice. And of course, this is the way I live. Anyways, and we sat down and talked about the risk from the family side of things before we were going to go off. And for almost 5 years, we were living on credit cards and risk, and so she had to be part of it at that point, and thank God was. But also your partners, you need this buy-in. You need to look at this sweat equity equitably. I have a niece whose husband went into contracting business with another guy. All well-meaning. Oh boy, we're going to work our tails off and we're going to do this, this, and this. They built a nice little business. The other guy started playing golf and taking vacations and doing stuff, and Joe ended up with the burden of a customer base that they had of serving it and doing it, and all of a sudden the sweat equitably disappeared, and he dissolved the company and they went off their separate ways, which was very messy, by the way, from a legal point of view. So understand with your partners, your risk takers, how far are you going to go with this? Is this 18-hour days? 26-hour days? What does it mean? Define the financial risk tolerance. Even you have to go and say, okay, $100,000 in debt is it. $250,000 is it. And when you get there, you've got to make some hard decisions. It's got to be, you've got to draw that line. I truly believe that, because you've got a life beyond your business and your risk-taking. And all of these things have to be faced in those early years of your setting up your company. And this is just this caution that I think is something I learned in some class about marriage counseling or something. But it's the unwritten contracts. My wife does the ironing and the laundry. Did we ever sit down and agree that that's what she was going to do? No. It's an unwritten contract. I take out the garbage. I repair things around the house. Is that a contract? No, it's an unwritten contract. Okay, did that light bulb get changed? No. Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I'm working on some project and she changes it. Resent? Maybe. Luckily, we have a pretty open communication, so we smooth by that in a lot of those little things. But those little things can build up. And now, remember I told you, this thing, you're with your partner, and in those early years, when there's a lot of tension, when there's not cash flow, when there's cash depletion going on, and just as in a family, money still is the thing that is most argued about. And so understanding those unwritten contracts and getting the things written down, not necessarily always in legalese, but they still should be written down. You're doing this, task-oriented. And quite honestly, if you're trying to build a company, you better be putting those operational kinds of things in place anyways in the early years. You really should discipline yourself and afford real time to do that, to build the structure of a company. And you're blowing your security when you become an entrepreneur. And so you've got to throw out the old title you had. It's, we get a lot of people in this community that worked at Dow and Dow Corning or even other big companies. And they had big jobs, and they understood their role in their industry, and they used to get their bonuses, and their career was on the hockey stick, and they went to some prestigious school. It just doesn't matter when you're an entrepreneur. You're all exposed. It's all gone. And so facing the ego aspect of this and switching your life to an id, where you're a doing factor, is a really, really important step. Because the growth curve is real, we all have to live and function with it, and we're going to go a little deeper into the early years. And so I call it the entrepreneurial stage, the early years, and then the operational or business stage when you get to an operating business. And in the entrepreneurial stage, this is the idea generation, and then the reduction to practice, and the market validation. And I'm not a university professor, so I haven't well studied this, but this, for our talk at least, I want to use this as the early years that we're going to talk about. And one of the things that's happening in those early years, your rate of growth is driven by, in a sense, your burn rate and your risk tolerance for money, for what that's going to be about. And so, again, facing the idea that you have to pass through these elements in these early years. So if you want to constrict these years, you've got to do this faster and better. And hopefully some of the things I'll talk about have some meaning for that. Because where are you leading to? And never lose track that you need an exit strategy, you need a next step strategy, because you're the entrepreneur, you're the boss at this stage of the company. And so when you get to the operational business stage, now you're doing some R&D possibly. You'll invest in that. You'll invest in professional marketing. You'll have professional sales. You've got an admin function that takes your accounting and all this stuff. So you're not doing all of this by yourself anymore. You're actually formulating a company. And now your rate of growth gets driven, if you're smart about the way you do things, by your cash flow. And again, another risk tolerance factor that you got to figure in. Not investors anymore, whether it's you or an outsider, it's customers. And you need to have that cash flow that in fact drives how much you can invest in these things for the operational business stage. And for most entrepreneurs, the lucky ones, realize this isn't what they do, and they get out of the way. It's just a thing. So the ideas, what are your products and services? The needs to fill. One of the things that I've always found attractive, and I guess I worked in tech service and development type jobs, where I had that customer interface with technologies and supply, is that I always knew that my products had to fill some sort of a need for my customer. It had to have a value proposition, and that I could both provide the value, but I could extract value from. And I had to realize that I had to be able to take my idea and define the customer that had the need and would extract the value. And then how did I get it to them? The channels of distribution and the service that has to come with that for different industries, for different market niches. This is a really important analysis in the early years. You have to be able to understand what your products and services and how they're going to be qualified. And this validation stage, which is the second component of the early years in my definition, is that technology and performance review. Am I getting the aesthetics? Am I getting the performance? Is my reduction to practice in either lab trials, computer simulations, or third-party reviews, are those validating the performance and the aesthetics that I've imagined in my great idea that I have? And then cross this over to the real world of the customer and the marketplace review. The idea of test markets, focus studies, home consumers, commercial, business to business, web sales, etc. What is the channel that you're going to use and to get to that customer? Because each person in that channel is a customer, and you have to do that same thing. You've got to provide them value at each stage, and you've got to be able to afford at each step in that distribution money coming off from your bottom line, because that's you're investing in. That's your sales route, and it costs you money to do it. My strongest suggestion for people at this stage, in the early years, find that target customer or customers and distribution route and test it. That's that focus that you'd love to have for validation. And if I was an investor in something, I'd demand this. Who's the customer that's going to buy this and show me that they did? Where did they pay for this? So finding that customer partner becomes important. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. The other thing that has to happen in the early years is not just having the idea and the validation of the idea, but also how do I protect it? Take this idea, products, services, and the validation that you have and check it out from the legal side, whether you want to keep things as intellectual property trade secret, whether you have the ability to do some sort of a patent. Can you build a protective branding strategy that can protect you in your marketplace? In a sense, not just the legal things that create protection, but the marketing things that can give you protection. And then you could target customers. And I'll explain that later. Some finger that didn't work. But you're going to target those customers, the distributors and the partners, and I really encourage people to challenge themselves at these early stages to thinking about, am I going to do a customer partner or a distributor partner relationship that in fact has a different kind of shared responsibility and shared revenue sharing in the equation, in my business equation. But what we really have to be sure that we're doing is fulfilling some needs. That means you got to understand the needs, right? So you got to get people to verbalize what do they want out of a relationship, and that's those unwritten contracts again. It all spins together. And but the secret that I read this Dan Coughlin I read an article by him about early stage startups, and one of the things that he emphasized, and read that and see if some of that jumps out at you. I just found that it was rang really, really true. Almost every entrepreneur that has approached success or is on the trail to success that I've met, they are passionate about what they're doing. They have this social or emotional or business good that's coming from something that they're willing to do 18-hour days or 26-hour days. So I really believe in this, and I believe that in that early years, if those founding people, those entrepreneurs, don't have this, I don't know that they'll succeed. I don't know how the plotter can get through all of that. I couldn't have. Critical advice to you and all around you in a startup company, the early years. Have a secret. Live to the secret. But on beyond the growth curve, when you get out into this operating company, you do have the ability to reinvent new products and services, and in a sense create another S-curve that's out here. You can do it with technology and features, you can do it branding, packaging, and positioning, you can do it with new markets or market channels, globalization, step out geographically in your marketplace. Be very cautious in this for cultural reasons, for investment reasons, for proximity reasons, in trying to manage that. So Scotty and I were able to pull off with some very able help of some people that worked for us, taking a company when we were very involved with the textile industry in the mid-'90s and late '90s, when the textile industry was leaving the U.S., we had to follow them, or we would have died as a company. And we found what I thought were extremely innovative and cheap ways to do it. And we did it successfully and ended up with a network that the major reason that the people that bought our company bought it was for that network. So the value wasn't the product. The value wasn't the skilled people we had. The value was the network that we had formed. We didn't set out to do that, to establish that as a value or an exit strategy value, but it ended up the most valuable component in the business. Mind the cash flow. Remember, you're an operating company now. You're not risking out here anymore. The fact is, as entrepreneurs, you don't necessarily think about it, you don't step back from it and look at it, but you're on the growth curve. And don't deny it. I think it's a very useful analysis tool for you to step back and look at things. Be sure that you go away from this with a resolve, or use this in future analysis as you look at companies and company opportunities, products opportunities, service opportunities. Who are you? Where are you going? And how are you going to get there? I can't tell you how many times I've asked this of people that have asked me for advice, and they don't know. And that's just a huge red flag. And it takes some real thought. Remember, we were all coached to do the elevator speech, and what's your 2-minute elevator speech and everything. Like, if you don't have that other stuff together, you won't be able to give that with sincerity, with believability. On the product service side, it's all about filling needs and wants. Selling Chevrolets, not Cadillacs. Cal and I could tell you stories of Cadillac products that were the best engineered products in the category that failed in the marketplace. Aztec. What was the Touch of Sweet? These were undoubtedly, technically, the best emollient cream and lotion, the best sunscreen, the first sunscreen that wouldn't wash off when you sweated or when you went swimming. Dow did those products. Had no idea how to channel them into a marketing and selling proposition. And they were so over-engineered, they didn't sell. And so, I don't know what went through your head in those days, Cal, because you were on the front line of it all, but it was, I, as an observer watching this, I became a believer in Chevrolets, that we can over-engineer our products. We can put too many bells and whistles on, and we think we're creating something better and better. But if we really understand the needs and wants of our consumers and of the distribution channel, we probably are going to sell more Chevrolets than we'll ever sell Cadillacs. And so I don't over-engineer things, just get it done. I really believe that's a thought pattern worthy of leaving with you. And something I find, I'm a great Disney fan, and of course Goofy is my favorite character, so I don't know if that's so stable, guys. But the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. We can, what do they say, paralysis by analysis and all of this kind of thing. The one true thing that an entrepreneur, especially in the early years, has to do is go. You gotta take it, and if you hit that brick wall, as long as you're doing it thoughtfully, and as long as you're recording it, and don't do it again, those are the steps that should happen in those early years. That's your chance to fail. Remember Mr. Dow's story. He didn't come here and set up the Dow Chemical Company. I don't remember how many iterations, but I think there were at least 3 where he totally went bankrupt and failed. And so what is all the marketing side of this means that talk fast, plan and work faster, but execute. Okay? Those are realities. The other thing is, I find that this is one of those truisms that goes with the growth curve. You can plan globally for that big company out here in the top part of the growth stage, but act locally. And that locally might be a customer focused, one at a time kind of idea, that customer partner that I was trying to allude to. Or it could be a geographical kind of thinking. But I really believe this is very, very important. We were working with some people for a year and a half. We invested a lot of time and effort. And they had this plan. They forgot to do this. And because they did, they failed. And we lost a fair amount of money in the process. So for a lot of different reasons, I thought that was a risk that we could take with White IEQ. It ends up without this focus. The truism was true. This customer focus thing is the hardest thing to do because you're so hungry in the early years. You almost want to follow up everything. You do want to follow up everything. Even if you think you can only make $50 from that deal, you'll spend 3 hours working at it, or 3 days, or 3 weeks. But you need to find that customer and focus on them. At your customer, make an advocate, coach, gatekeeper a hero. I've really found that over the years that as I work with the specifiers, or I work with the people that are going to make purchase decisions or highly influence the purchase decisions for my products inside of a company, make them your advocate, your coach, your gatekeeper. But you've got to make them a hero. And when you find those purchase influencers, move on, because you want to get to the purchase decision makers, and you want to make them a superhero. So how do you do that? You need to understand their corporate culture, their processes, what is their stage of business development. It'd be fun to take a poll, but how many of you have been in a situation where you go into a company and the person you're going through has a job responsibility on their checklist for their to-dos of introducing 6 new people this year to the company? You become one of those. That's not an advocate that's going to take you to a product usage. He's just getting his checklist filled out. And so you've got to recognize that quickly. Is that a person that in fact, or the corporation, has a strategic reason for having new things because they're doing a stock play or because they're doing a sale to somebody else? And you just become a pendant thing here rather than something that's really driving to a customer-focused marketplace where you get sales. How do you protect yourself against that? And the entrepreneurial, those early years, you tend to dive into those things rather than going in a planned way where there are contractual responsibilities of payments and things of that sort. Don't get caught in that trap. The difference between a purchase influencer and a purchase decision maker can be like night and day. And so when I think of the customer part of those early years, be sure that you pay heed to these elements. And from the company, as we are concluding this, do that gut check that for yourself and for all involved. And don't be embarrassed. Jim, are you really going to be here on Labor Day working with me? You know? And Jim says, I'm going up to cottage, you know? And that's where I'm at in life. Jim, this isn't going to work because we've got an order that's due the next day. And I've got to be honest enough. And Jim goes up to his cottage and I help fulfill the order. It's water off my back if I want to keep working with Jim. And you just, the next day, he comes back and, hey, we got 3 more things that are exciting. And so that gut check and that honesty between each other, the founding people and these people that come along to help you build this thing, because they may do it because they've got a job and whatever, but they probably are doing it because they want to help you build something. That's finding the team that's compatible and then treat them right. Scotty and I work really, really hard at being benevolent dictators, and I really do value that. It paid off for us. We got the loyalty, we got the hard work, we got the extra hours, we got the productivity, we got the heart that went with what we wanted to portray as a company, and it worked. And we know that surviving that, the early years, and then get out of the way. This is something we didn't recognize. We never really sat down and devised an exit strategy or talked about the various exit strategies. And in retrospect, looking at what other people have done with similar companies, and I would bet, Cal, you probably ask yourself this at different points. Could you have taken it if you had different kind of investors, different kind of mindset? Could you have taken that company and been a $60 million a year company? And we had a technological lock that we chose to sell as a product with services rather than selling as a consumer product, rather than selling something forward in the market chain. And we made that as a conscious decision. But that drives your exit strategy. And it drives a lot of what you're doing. And so if we did it kind of serendipitously, I think if you do it in a planned way, you'll be a whole lot better when you realize that you need to get out of the way. I honestly have not met an entrepreneur that's suited at all to run a company. And you can all say, no, that's me. I can do it. And I fooled myself for a long time because I know all that stuff. And hey, those marketing people, they just play golf and they, take people out to dinner, and that's pretty cool. I can do that. I'm a pretty good golfer, and so and then you realize, no, it's way bigger than that. And the operational parts of a company, quite honestly, most entrepreneurs be bored silly with that aspect of it. Steve Jobs, who we might look at as a successful guy, God rest his soul, he knew that about himself. He never got involved in running a company or a division or any parts of it. He was always there, stirring the pot, getting people in competitive work teams, doing the old NASA tricks, and in terms of motivating people. And he was able to build, what's become now what? What did they announce yesterday? The largest, highest valued company ever in all of history. These are cautions, pathways I lay down for the looking at the growth curve as a business monitoring and business structuring tool, and the early years. So I hope there were some tidbits out of that that were useful to you, and I'm certainly open to any kind of questions.
Curt, Midland's a pretty unique community for dealing with entrepreneurs and startups. We have a disproportionate number of midlife executives that have started a new life and are exploring. They're mentors for us, they're entrepreneurs, they're blue water angels. You've been on both sides of this, and I think there's some treacherous pitfalls when you come out of a large corporation, you go to a startup, but there's also tremendous benefits. Can you tell us what are the biggest benefits, and then what are the biggest pitfalls?
I'm going to start with the pitfalls, when I'm sure you didn't really structure it, because I'm an entrepreneur and I can do what I want. The biggest pitfall for us were what people would call the admin function of a company. The basic organizational things of who's doing your accounting. In the big companies, if I wanted a specialist in Michigan environmental law, I picked up the phone and I had access to that person certainly within a day. And it didn't show up on the bottom line of my budget. If I need a specialist in some marketing niche, or I wanted to know something about the construction industry, I picked up the phone and I had it. If I was looking at monitoring, say, a government contract where I did have responsibilities to monitor the budget, if I wanted to do that, they had specialists that did that. And when Scotty and I first came out, that's a good expression nowadays. And, it was a close relationship. When we went out, left the big company, went out in the real world, that was the thing we missed the most. And Scotty, God bless him, became that admin. And partially his legal training, the discipline of the way lawyers are trained to think, or they go into that profession because they think that way, was very, very important. He learned all of the accounting procedures. He learned all of that stuff and built that into the company. And by the way, that's a good question, Ken, because he did that in the early years. He did that in our risk years. And when we got the operating company right around that, we started in 1990, and so 95, 96, when we really had a company and it was global, everything was smooth. Those systems all came together. We changed computer programs and all that kind of thing, but for the most part, all of those operating elements were in place. I was asked by various people at Dow Corning and various people at Dow Chemical those same kinds of questions because they were looking at orphan chemicals and how could they better capitalize on taking some of those out of the corporations. And in the sessions I had with people, that ability to have a suite of admin function things that you could take Mr. Brainiac about some special resin that Dow wasn't going to develop and say, hey, we're going to set you up with this organization, and then you're down the road, you're on your own, but we're going to do this initially, and so they didn't have to early retire some guy. They actually kept it functional. There were all kinds of good reasons to do it for them, and but to give them the better foothold to be successful. Scotty and I stumbled so much in those early years because of that. So that was the thing from the reward side, the independence that we had. Most people in big corporations, certainly people with an entrepreneurial or intrapreneurial spirit, you get tired of the paperwork. You get tired of the communications that are needed in a corporation of that sort. And you just want to make decisions and go. And so we love the independence of that. And we talk about it often. And because Scotty was in the legal department, and it was right at the beginning of the breast implant suits, the whole legal department essentially became focused on the three major suits that were going on, and bankruptcies and all of the other things associated with it. And so they were consulting to outside lawyers and being a conduit to the inside of Dow Corning. He didn't go into being a lawyer, especially a business marketing lawyer, for that. And so he was really glad to be out of there. And I missed it enormously because of the stimulation of the technology that you get in a big corporation. So I missed some of that. And luckily, for the things I needed, I still had friendships and relationships and corporate relationships. We had legal corporate things with Dow Corning that allowed us to ask questions and do the right things under confidentialities and such. But so I could have missed the technological base, the business base, but the rewards that came from, and there's a feeling that I don't know if I could describe it. Cal, you went through this, and I don't know if you had these same things, but when you had a work group in Dow or Dow Corning, you helped people build careers and you helped people succeed by getting them their resources for them to do their job more effectively. And I always saw my manager's job as having, that was one of my big responsibilities. And I felt good about that. You know, when you move people and you saw young people reaching different aspirations and stuff. But when we were doing that as a company, it felt so much better. It really did. The burden of the risk of that, if you are a feeling person, you know, and hopefully everybody has some, even under the artist shell or something, you know, that you have to be careful of that crossover of when you're a friend and when you're a boss, and that's harder in a small company, you know. So risk reward. I don't know if you felt any of those things, Kel.
With no compassion on the door.
From the management school of SOB. Actually, the Dilbert, did you see the Dilbert thing this week? You know, he's talking to the boss. Dilbert on Sunday was his great wisdom about entrepreneurs. He laid it out this way. Dilbert was talking to the boss. You need to act more like an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs make decisions that will end in failure 90% of the time. They motivate people through bullying, lying, manipulating, and verbal abuse. Entrepreneurs make their employees work so many hours that their personal lives and their bodies fall apart. The boss's response: I've been doing that stuff for all these years. Dilbert: has it worked? No. Dilbert: well, in that case, you're not an entrepreneur. You're just a jerk. And the boss says, is that why no one is writing my blogography? I don't like some of the extremes of that, but it's kind of funny. Ted.
I wondered, the thing we see, I think, is investors here and friends and people involved in new businesses. My observation is marketing is always a big challenge. Most of us are technologists and that sort of thing. And, you talked a little bit about the customer, but it seems like we don't really invest in understanding the market to the degree that a Dow Corning or a Dow Chemical would do, and that's one of the areas I think that causes the most failures for startup businesses. I just wondered, I know your market, basically, you probably knew a lot of it from your Dow Corning days.
Yeah, there was a slide over, yeah.
But I just wondered if still you ran into the problem where new markets or whatever you didn't understand as well as you would have liked to.
You know, Ted brings up a really, really critical point, and I tried to capture that in what I think the early stage people should do in that validation stage, because stepping forward from the science side to the customer side and being sure that that needs analysis is done. The very structured Bacon analysis, planned innovation kinds of thinkings, and even before that, when I was at Dow Chemical, we had very, very nice tools for looking at needs analysis and wants analysis of what we were designing products for, or what we were fitting products into, which was more often the case. The importance of that, and the fact that you as an entrepreneur don't have those resources to delve that deeply is a gap, and it's a challenging one. Especially when you make that transition from that entrepreneurial to an operational company, because there you're going to maybe hope that your products and services expand from your core business that you went out and made your foothold with to a broader array of business to beat that S-curve again, you know, to get it out there. And doing that with a real concern for cash flow is very, very difficult, because you tend to put that stuff off the agenda. It's like advertising. It gets off the agenda because you don't know how to have a metric against the productivity of it. And so you tend not to do it. And then you could miss a whole customer opportunity, marketplace opportunity. I think those tools, we probably missed some things in a lot of details, because we did go into some new markets, Ted, and we could have benefited tremendously. I think one of the MMIC resources is to help, and the state now is offering some opportunities if you're thinking out far enough, because there's a gap of time while that has to be implemented. But there are some encouraging resources, I think, for startup companies and second-tier companies to get resources to help them with a more professional view of the marketplace. That needs and wants analysis is where I always started, because I was a product developer. And so, but that leaves and I think what Ted is asking in his question is, that leaves a big gap of the actual distribution. Remember the 5 Ps that they use in marketing, how you place it in a distribution channel is part of those Ps. and that is that's a conundrum for entrepreneurs, certainly in the early years.
Your S-curve that you had there seemed pretty typical, about kind of 2 years of 1% market share, and then the 3rd year you start to get some traction, and 4th year you're rolling, that kind of thing. And I think that most business people would say that's a reasonable S-curve, but that's not my S-curve. I'm different, right? Everybody that starts their own company says their S-curve, you're not going to have 2 years flat.
Because I know this.
I'm going to have maybe 1 year flat. I'm willing to suffer for 1 year, but mine's going to be a hockey stick. And after that first year, by year number 2, if I'm not flying, something's wrong, because my product is so good and I've got such a vision, and it sells itself, and it's so needed, it fills such a need, and so forth. Okay, so that translates to your partners that you're developing too, your employees, your people that are working with you. They get excited, they see the vision, they see the potential, they want to be part of it. So they get in and they're enthusiastic, they're right along with you. But then they get out there to the market, and after they get beat up a little bit, and it doesn't sell itself, and it takes longer to get traction. How do you maintain that enthusiasm and not just crank through one potential partner after another that gets discouraged too quickly?
That happens to everybody. It certainly happened to us as we brought people into the mix. But it was pretty much Scotty and I and a couple of other people that had a shared vision, and shared risk and understanding. There wasn't a need for a lot of that. But as we got a little bit bigger, and we did hit some troughs, either because of the economy, because the cotton prices went crazy and the textile industry went nuts, because Walmart decided on a different buying strategy or whatever. When you hit some of those things and you had to recover from it, that corporate depression, and I'll tell you, the only thing that I think helped us was, I think, that people trusted Scotty and I, because we had this track record. Well, how do you build that trust? It isn't because I've got a nice smile or whatever, but we had transparency in our company. And the recent issue of Inc. magazine talks about the top 500 growing companies and stuff, and there were some interviews about the CEOs and things. And almost, I forget the number, but it was a significant number, like up near 70% of the companies operate on 100% transparency, to their employees. And these are private companies, that they're talking about. So we're talking about saying, here's the books, here's what we're doing. We did that, and we do a monthly basis, up with the charts and in the whole thing. But that financial transparency is one thing, but also business strategy and business thinking. And even though we didn't have an exit strategy, we had option strategies that we operated the company on. And we talked to them about, hey, if this happens, we're going to have to cut people back.
And the transparency builds loyalty too. And so when you have that loyalty within a company, you feel vested in it, and so you're in some ways you're okay to kind of handle those troughs of time when things are a little tight as well.
And then maybe there's just a bunch of luck in there someplace, but that to me was probably the way we got through that, because we definitely have to. And this market entry cycle for different businesses and different industries, I think some of us that have been observant and lived through enough of this, we have a good feel for that, maybe a tighter feel than a lot of other people that are involved in things. But at the same time, it's always, just like people say, it's twice as long, twice as expensive. And in certain market channels, like ag, or something like that, it's astronomical. How the uncertainty factors that are out there in terms of your success in a market channel. There are some strategies that can be employed for that, but it's very, very tricky. We deal in the buildings marketplace, and we have this big project in Singapore right now. They have a disaster. So all of a sudden they want us, you know, and they're paid. I mean, I hate to tell you, I mean, a lot of money for me to come up and say, yeah, you know, that musty smell you have, that's mold. You know, all that black fuzzy stuff on the wall, yep, that's mold. You know, and I get paid, and you know, so but they are. I mean, it's a huge emergency situation for them. If I went to that same hotel group and tried to sell our value and services and things like that, I bet I couldn't get past the first layer of people. And so it's, you know, those entry points, I call them the decision influencers and then the decision makers. But you've got to get the door opener. I should put that one on there for sure. How do you get in there and then build that relationship, the trust relationship? That's why you act locally, think globally, because you can't build a trust relationship in that global marketplace until you have that foothold in the other. And I don't care what you're selling or what you're doing, all this magic web sales and stuff. Now I'm just the old fart believing that the old way is the way to do things, but it's eyeball to eyeball. It's still trust relationships. And in the web, where you can have somebody on my Facebook that has some sort of a trust relationship with me, or whatever, maybe that works for certain types of products and services. What we do in the buildings marketplace, no way, you know. And so those and penetrating that is really, really agonizing. And then you get in a marketplace like automotive or medical that just doesn't change. They don't change. And you've got the best thing since sliced bread, and you know it is, and you've verified it, and you've done all of these other things. Getting through that person that's going to take a career risk, a job risk, two different things, for you. You know, and so you're asking somebody at some point to make a career decision on you inside of their corporation. So how do you soften that? You've got to get to know them. Well, that's eyeball to eyeball and build those trust. We're doing some things with the Veterans Administration right now, and you talk about a bureaucracy on top of a bureaucracy on top of a bureaucracy. Holy cow. And it's totally funded at the President's discretion. This doesn't come out of the Defense Department's budget. The whole Veterans Administration is purely at the President's discretion. But how do they do that? You know, you've got that driver up there that controls all the money that, with all the good, well-meaning things down below. Well, finding those entry points and those influence points is hard work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of investment.
I want to make a comment. There's a lot of hard work and gaps in knowledge in starting a company, but there's a lot of advantages too. A big corporation cannot match the nimbleness with which a small outfit, even a one-person outfit, can deliver. When we were in our early stages at Caltech, we would get a request for a sample, and if it would come in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the UPS was scheduled to pick up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we'd say, you know, we couldn't get that out today. But our people learned that where we were on the UPS schedule, And they picked up the phone and said, drive by us and come back at 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, we had that sample ready to go out. So the people knew the importance of getting the sample out on time. If it was within the one-day service area, they would wait until the end of the 24 hours and they'd call that person up and say, did you get our sample?
Sweet. Yeah.
A big corporation cannot do that. You may get the sample 2 or 3 weeks later, or you might get it 6 weeks later when they've deemed it important enough to have it delivered by a salesman. You know. But there are a lot of areas like that where you have the advantage. And we were competing against Lysol, which was, at the time, was a $500 million brand. But there are a lot of situations like that where, you do have the advantage. You may not have the best market research or the best user research, or you may have lots of handicaps, but you can find some advantages to get this little eyeball or eardrum to eardrum intimacy into your business development. I had a question that I wanted to ask you. When you started out in business, you were going to offer a service in addition to a product.
Right.
But later on, you kind of backed off of offering the service. Why did you think it was so important to offer the service at the beginning? And what did you run into that made you want to kind of back off of the service at a later point in your company's development?
I'll give you two answers to it, because the first answer was that when we were buying the technology and the product and the rights to the patents and all of the things from Dow Corning, the aftercare, the treatment of buildings and things in an aftermarket service business was what they sold us. So they didn't give us everything. The OEM uses of the technology, they retained that for a few years. We bought that later, but that was part of the reason. But in a more analytical way, it wasn't just because that's what we had. We really thought that by bundling the product into a services package, that we could, in fact, penetrate the market faster and give better needs satisfaction to the customer. Because if you had a sick building, we could come in, do the analytical work, do the other things that came with the package, and then use our treatment as a protective treatment for a long-term benefit. And so we saw that as an elegant way, without a bunch of patents, to protect ourselves in the marketplace and to minimize the chance of unbundling that every good purchasing agent will try to do. So there was an intellectual reason. The operational, now you get into the real world of that. Scotty and I had worked in big corporations pretty much all of our lives, other than our paper routes. And so we were came from that mindset and experience. And running a service company that had crews of day workers out in buildings, scurrying about, looking for mold and killing it with our various treatments and protocols, was not a company we knew how to manage. We'd never functioned in that. Now, we hired some good people. We had some regional offices that ran fairly efficiently. But the jobs were fairly manic depressive in terms of the nature of the buildings marketplace. So if there was a lot of hurricane action, we got some business in Florida, et cetera. So, but we really stepped back from it one day. Once we got the OEM products, and now we're treating socks and medical goods and stuff like that, all of a sudden the actual cash flow of the company was coming, ultimately it got to 98%, was coming from the products part of our OEM part of our business rather than from that aftercare service business. Well, long before we got to that 98 number, we realized that, one, we didn't know how to manage it. We weren't going to bring in partners we tried with ServiceMaster and some other people to do some partnering. They weren't up for change. And so we knew we weren't going to invest in having that dilution of the company in a sense, and have different bosses again. So we just made that decision. And one, we weren't good at it, and two, we didn't want to bring in the people that were good at it. And so we ended up setting up a certified applicator program for that part of the business, and we nurtured along some things, especially in the global areas, which we're still managing now. But that switch to the OEM side of it, Cal, gave us a whole different profit center and capability, and we capitalized on that. So that was kind of the progression of it, and the decision making along the way. Cash flow, cash flow, cash flow.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Curt.
Yeah, good thing.
We did record this presentation. It will be on our website at some point in the Stone Soup section, and we'll let you all know when that is. But thank you all for coming. Stay in network. If you want a tour, let us know, and have a great day.